On July 6th, Uranus enters Gemini, beginning a new era and new beginning of inner awakening, mental evolution, and quite frankly, collective evolution like we've never seen. Now, I'm not kidding when I say that, by the way. The last time Uranus entered Gemini, Neptune entered Aries, and Pluto entered Aquarius at the same time, which outer planets entering new zodiac signs is already a rare thing in itself, was tens of thousands of years ago. And it's really impossible to know what was going on planet Earth as far as humanity is concerned. I'm sure some archaeologists know what's going on or knew what was going on back then. But one thing is for sure, we can look at the world right now and we can see very, very clearly certain things that are unavoidable to see and conflicts that are unavoidable to witness. So in today's video, I definitely don't want to get political by any means, and I always want to do my best to provide education that will help you on a spiritual and psychological level, of course. But when we talk about outer planet shifts, we have to bring in perspective and kind of viewpoints that really try to explain the reality we are witnessing unfold, or the reality that is unfolding before us, rather. My intention always is to guide you and to make you feel that there is a reason for our experience, and that also includes the things that go on around us in the world. Now, I don't think it's important to fixate every second of your life on the world. And I think this is actually probably a great piece of advice for Uranus going into Gemini, because Gemini is a planet of the mind, of thought, of communication. It is a zodiac sign, rather. I don't know if I said planet or zodiac sign. It is ideas and thought, duality and adaptability. So we're going to have to learn to get very Gemini, involving the sporadic and erratic, sudden awakening planet of Uranus. Now, this is going to stimulate and shock the world in many ways, just like Uranus will come into the Gemini part of your life and suddenly alter and change and awaken things there that may or may not have anything to do with what Jupiter provided you in this last year. Now, this is kind of like a preview video to probably many other talks that I make here, especially for the July forecast, which is going to be coming in a few weeks, because that's the big month, July 6th. That is when Uranus gets into Gemini. So of course we're going to talk about it. Uranus will be immediately sextiling the early degrees of Aries, which is Saturn and Neptune. They are just hanging out there, and they're going to be swinging back and forth for, Saturn and Neptune will go back into Pisces in the fall, and then by late January into February, we have the epic 0 degree Neptune-Saturn conjunction, which at that point, Uranus will be back in Taurus until April. So imagine that. We're getting these few months into the fall of Uranus and Gemini. Then it goes back into Taurus until literally almost like late spring-ish, mid-spring, right? So we're going to have a dark winter, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, even though I am kind of concerned with maybe what things that can go on in the world, of course, over the next couple of years, because that's what I've been saying for a long time on the channel when I do bring up world events, that these outer planets are going to be aspecting each other by sextiles and trines, which, yes, are favorable aspects. Pluto's trining Uranus. Pluto is sextiling Aries. Uranus is sextiling Aries. But again, that is just allowing like the gasoline to be poured more and more on a fire that is radically going to be shifting the world, and hopefully a positive way as we get further down the line. But guys, the growing pains are real. And I think a lot of us are still going to go through growing pains individually in a lot of ways. But again, I always try to make the point too, like what goes on in the world doesn't necessarily reflect our own missions that we came here to Earth to fulfill, So a lot of us can be doing really well for ourselves as the world like technically shifts and changes and kicks and screams on its way to a new one. And no one is going to know the details of how that new world or whatever that looks like, how we get there, I mean, will we have war? That's as wild as maybe World War II or the Civil War. Like the transits in play with these outer planets were in these zodiac signs during very powerful wars that are in recent memory, by the way. World War II, Uranus and Gemini. Uranus and Gemini was also around the Civil War. Neptune and Aries, the last time Neptune and Aries was around the Civil War. The Revolutionary War had Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius. That's why the Pluto return was such a big deal over the last couple of years at those late degrees of Capricorn. And if you really think about the Revolutionary War, Pluto entered Aquarius shortly after, I think, the Declaration of Independence and all that stuff was written and signed. And that was really the first 20 or so years of a new America. Whether you agree with how America started or not, that is just the astrology. Now, we are in an era of time right now when we are dealing with those themes of massive shifts. But again, not all of them have aspected each other like this. So this is why this moment in time for the world and for us is so crucial. And this is why it's so crucial for us to have a spiritual practice, for us to understand the Gemini, Aries, and Aquarius part of your life, okay? Because these parts of our lives are getting directly aspected by these sextiles and trines and are asking us, and we should already be understanding what part of our lives that is. Okay, where is Aquarius? Where is Aries? Where is Gemini? Every reading I do with a client, we heavily discuss these outer planet shifts because everybody I talk to is really just altering their life in those parts of their lives in massive ways. Massive ways. Okay, I'm a Scorpio rising, and my 4th house of Aquarius is being radically changed on the deepest foundation of who I am. And also there's a lot of family stuff going on in my life. And Aries, again, I talk all about my 6th house, about my daily life routines and my health and wellness, and even, again, becoming more and more intuitive as I've gotten older. Because obviously, if you're a natural born sensitive throughout the most of your life, if you get into spiritual work, you're only naturally going to get more intuitive and psychic. It's just the deal. And my North Node is at 3 degrees Aries. So I'm in a very powerful moment in my life where all of these outer planets are hitting that. So, and I'm doing something in my life after many years of struggle and trauma, quite frankly, where I personally feel I'm stepping into my calling as a mystic, as someone who helps people every day. And that is, and I don't want to talk about myself but I know a lot of you guys like when I talk about my life experiences, but that's the point. Life can still unfold and fulfill a mission that we feel deeply called to, while the world is also sort of fulfilling a mission that Mother Gaia, Earth, is deeply called to as well. So we are all part of this organism of life and the universe and existing within this dream in God's mind, however you want to view the divine, whatever. But these outer planet shifts are what define the evolution of humanity, soul and spirit, period, full stop. Everything is evolution. Now, in today's video, because I know I'm probably going to rant and rave, and this may actually sound a little bit different than some of my other videos. And every now and then, I kind of want to maybe just come on and be a little bit, even though I feel I am kind of loosey-goosey with you guys when I do talk astrology here, but every now and then I feel like I want to come on and just maybe be a little bit more raw, where maybe I don't do so many edits in the video. When I first started the channel, I kind of was just chilling here with a microphone and just sort of blathering on. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of you guys like the way I make my videos now, but I feel like a video like today is just sort of going to be a muse that's a little bit maybe more lighthearted. Maybe you guys like when I post a little extra videos every now and then. I'm thinking about doing a Tarot Tuesday here, actually. So let me know if you think that idea is good. Not like doing like tarot pulls and like doing stuff that tarot readers all over YouTube do, because that's really not my thing. But maybe something where I can just like pull a tarot card or two and educate you guys about it. Talk about it, or talk more about a card in relevance to a particular transit, and we can examine the Decans a little bit more. So I'm thinking about doing that. But anyway, I'm jumping around. Look at me. Now, again, today, a little bit of a preview of Uranus and Gemini. Nothing crazy. But I think we really can expect on the world stage for massive things to unfold that involve innovation, awakening, liberation, liberation from tradition, mind you. So again, I think that all of these growing pains in the world are an awakening away from the world, the way the world has always run. So that is massive. And that is also what Pluto and Aquarius has showed us throughout history. Massive evolutions of consciousness, innovation, and Uranus and Gemini is all about how this information and how this affects the consciousness of the collective and also ourselves. Okay. The Gemini part of your life is very mental. It's very communicative there. I'm sure you will get very mentally and overloaded in the Gemini part of your life. And you probably think very, very quickly, or maybe have a little ADD in that part of your life or something. But Gemini is communication, ideas, thoughts, duality, being adaptable, excuse me, if I can speak right. Language, networks, and of course, curiosity. Uranus in Gemini brings radical changes in thinking, technology, language, and perception. Okay. Again, perception, the way we perceive reality, the way we perceive ourselves in the Gemini parts of our lives, wherever that is. And by the way, tell me where Gemini is in your life. Drop comments, please. I love reading your comments, and that really does help the channel's growth here, by the way. The more people engage with the channel. But again, this often correlates with the world with revolutionary communication shifts. Revolutionary communication shifts. We are in an age where AI is at a precipice of where humanity goes from here. Okay. Now, the last time Uranus was in Gemini was in the 40s, and we saw the rise of computing, radar, code breaking, okay, which won the war, by the way, thanks to Alan Turing. And post-World War II geopolitical alignments happened. We were talking about Gemini themes of how we communicate and how we build structures, and NATO was formed, all that stuff, guys. So again, on the world stage, we are looking at a lot of stuff like that, you know, and I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. We are looking at a world where there are conversations and activist movements, and there are things happening that are very much tied to Uranus and Gemini, and we're already starting to feel that energy. And Pluto in Aquarius is this shamanic force that demands a death before there's a regeneration and rebirth. And this is why wherever Pluto transits in your birth charts, you are fated throughout your life to undergo many, many kind of deaths in a way. Like not literal deaths, maybe for some people literal death, maybe there could be a lot of deaths in somebody's Pluto transits, but it's really about getting to the heart of ego destruction, just some kind of metaphorical spiritual deconstruction for there to be something new to be born. You know, think of Pluto. I don't know if this is a good analogy, but think of it as like if you're a fundamentalist Christian your whole life and you finally break away from the church, but you need to spend fucking a decade deprogramming yourself from the orthodoxy and that mental stuff. You know what I mean? And nothing against the Christian religion whatsoever. Again, I'm not going to be here to preach to you about stuff like that. I think the mystical truth of God or whatever is at the heart of all religion, to be quite honest, just in different languages. But think of Pluto and Aquarius, or Pluto generally, as this shamanic force that takes time for us to relearn an entire part of our life. But we know we're undergoing that transformative change. And Pluto and Aquarius, and Pluto generally speaking, is doing that for the entire world in a very Aquarian way. That is why the rise of kind of a fascist impulse has been so dominant in the world. This is why so many things involving power and control have been more dominant. And some can argue, like, you know, of course, Democratic parties can be just as much of, you know, an establishment type of untrustworthy energy just as much as the right wingers are. But, you know, it's just like, where do we go from here, and what is most beneficial for all people? Because that's really what government's supposed to do. It is supposed to be about helping everybody. It's supposed to be about how do we create like a nation or something that is beneficial for all people. I mean, that should be the intention of any organization and group. Okay. Now, in our own life, we are innovating and changing and transforming in a very Aquarian way as well. And I think when we talk about some of these outer transits, and again, Neptune in Aries and Saturn in Aries, this is the fuel. This is the fire. This is the fight. This is the war. This is the conflict. This is the assertiveness that we are being tasked with, whether on the world stage, again, with conflicts, wars, riots in the streets, battling over immigration stuff with ICE. I mean, Jupiter just entered Cancer at the time of recording this video, and we are having a square to Aries. No wonder why there's riots and why there's going to be possible more authoritarian impulses around implementing very aggressive, more aggressive actions against how potentially conflicts or protests or uprises can be handled. Okay. There's also a lot of talk involving Uranus and Gemini. I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit, guys, today, because this is just sort of a prelude into some, really powerful shifts in this world and, of course, our own lives. And Uranus and Gemini, AI, this is where, the Trump administration is already talking about AI tracking on all Americans. Well, I wonder if people who voted for him were in favor of this. People who wanted small government are now going to get one of the biggest surveillance undergoings ever in American history, potentially, because tracking down people who speak out against a particular viewpoint now must be tracked. Now, that is quite... what would you say? This is exactly what a lot of people were blaming, I guess, the left-wingers for a couple of years ago. This is exactly what authoritarianism is. And we are looking at how all these outer planets are dancing and speaking different languages through different political parties, through different intentions. And this is sort of what we are all going to be faced with as a collective. Okay, and this is very important to understand, because if we're going to evolve as a human race, if we really want to reach some of those ascension consciousness states that every New Ager talks about, if we want to liberate ourselves, this is the time that we simultaneously do that as the world is undergoing what it's undergoing. This is where the resistance comes in. This is where people organizing and creating new communities and groups. This is how you develop new worlds to combat old ones. Now, don't get it twisted. Birthing a new world takes a lot of mental energy, a lot of spiritual energy, okay? And that is what Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, and Pluto in Aquarius will also provide us. They are very transpersonal spiritual forces, okay? The inner planets, the traditional 7 planets of astrology, they're more personal in nature. Okay, maybe not so much Saturn and Jupiter, but when we talk about these outer planets, we can't see them with the naked eye. They are ethereal in nature. They are beyond the scope of physical reality. They are energies that shape from a very ethereal place, if you will. And this is the mystery of, life, metaphysics, astrology, etc. But this is a time where when we deal with a Uranus and Gemini energy, for example, where the thoughts and the communication and the psychic information that we intuit and gain, this is the stuff that we need in order for there to be the counter to what is being so to the conflict that is arising before us. Now, the first decan of Gemini, guys, this is ruled by the tarot card, 8 of Swords. Now, I work with the tarot in astrology, and that I work with the decans pretty heavily. And the first decan of Aquarius, where Pluto is the 5 of Swords. So that trine, 5 of Swords energy to the 8 of Swords energy, we are dealing with one card that symbolizes conflict, okay? And we're dealing with, again, conflict that's more on the outside, I would say, even though there could be an internal conflict with the 5 of Swords. But really it's about, again, there is an essence of defeat as well. So there's this back and forth of conflict, defeat, in my opinion. Okay, who's at the defeat? Who's the victor in this, or who thinks they're the victor? Like, what is going on with that? The Eight of Swords is all, again, mental entrapment and mental imprisonment. It is about breaking free. Okay, so there is something very important to understand. To that first decan of Gemini, which is also ruled by Jupiter, by the way. So again, there is an expansive tone to Gemini's intellectual and curiosity in this first decan. So this is why I think getting very creative and getting insight in the way that we are interacting with the world, the way the world is unfolding, and the way that we show up in the Gemini part of our life is going to be very, very important for mental liberation. And the new moon that we just had actually in Gemini 2025 fell in that first decan. Okay, so we were dealing with a birthing of mental liberation. So I would say track with the Gemini part of your life, maybe track with that new moon and see what was birthed there. Because Uranus and Gemini in these first years, transiting that first decan, are going to be very liberating and very psychically oriented, involving how we break free from the mental entrapment and prison that we have created ourselves. And I want to say that some of that is self-generated for this particular part of the Gemini story. Okay, so the sense of being stuck is over, and Uranus is going to want to come in while Aries is sextiling and Pluto is trining to provide some of these powerful energies and these powerful forces to allow you to also use that Eight of Swords mental liberation with all those other parts of your lives. So this is really the transit where we liberate ourselves, and of course where we begin to see how the world starts to handle what it's like to face liberation in a way that is extremely radical. Okay, and the old world's not going to like that. Okay, the old world, the authoritarian impulses are not going to like that. If we do have a third world war, which I'm not ruling out, by the way, I don't know what that stuff's going to look like, but again, these astrology outer planets point to an evolutionary process where conflict probably will arise in one way or another in a grand way, so the evolution of a new phase of consciousness can be born. So we have to understand conflict is fucking necessary for growth. That's why I always tell you guys, squares and oppositions are not something we should fear. It's something we should honor. And that is something that we have to even zoom out and get real with when it comes to things even like war. Because again, we're not going to control what the powers that be do, but what we can trust in is the evolutionary process of consciousness and spirit. And the duality of this life requires conflict. That is what duality is all about. And that is what Uranus and Gemini is probably going to show us very powerfully in the first couple of years, because these are when the aspects are most powerful to Pluto and to Neptune. So the next 5 to 10 years are going to be massive in transformation. A deep call to awaken. Okay? This is going to be massive as we break free from a lot of the limitations and a lot of the prisons that have been built within society, within our own psyches, within our own stories. Okay, this is huge, my friends. Now, this really is an inner awakening of the mind and the mind of the world. Okay, Uranus and Gemini, the Eight of Swords. Again, Uranus will transit that first decan probably for like 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years, maybe a little less than 5 years. And those aspects are going to be very strong to Neptune and to Pluto. This is an inner awakening of the mind. Uranus is entering my 8th house, and my 8th house is very much a psychic place with my moon and Chiron there. Okay. And like I tell you all the time, guys, I feel I've been becoming more intuitive and psychic. Like, I mean, I don't want to say more. Yeah. I mean, it's been getting stronger. I mean, to the point where now I'm offering tarot readings on my website. Okay. Through astrology, like to the point where, I might dip in and offer even past life trauma work for people. Okay. Because there's a lot in the birth chart we can look at for past life stuff. And I know that really has liberated me in many ways in my life when I've learned a lot about the South Node past life themes. And that is huge. So an inner awakening of the mind, massive, absolutely massive, which means that we might suddenly be aware of our thought patterns, narratives, mental habits we've been running on autopilot. Okay, the habits of ourselves, and if we look at the habits of the world, these are going to undergo awakenings in a very mental way. Mental liberation is also, again, mental liberation. That is a huge aspect of this Uranus and Gemini transit in these early years. Okay, again, dealing with AI as well. Are we going to be friends with AI, or is it going to destroy the world? Can we learn how to work with this technology, or are we going to become dumber? Are we going to are we going to become lazier? Are we just not going to want to do hard things or critically think? Okay, I think we have a huge problem with critical thinking, especially people who maybe consume too much fast-paced social media. And not only are you not taking the time to critically think and analyze content that you're viewing, but you're also not taking the intuitive moments, or you're totally, or many people out there are neglecting their discernment because there's so much stuff happening all the time, and we're losing our intuition in some respects, because people are just being mentally overloaded, and it can cloud intuition. Think about that. Too much mental stimulation will cloud your intuition. So we have to get out of this mindset, in the spiritual communities at least, that all of us are becoming more intuitive and psychic. And that could be true. That could be very true. For those who are doing the shadow work and who are actually doing the work, who might be limiting their time on fast-paced social media apps, who might be taking the time to come back to spiritual practices, to really inform themselves on who they are at the deepest levels, those are the folks that are becoming more intuitive and psychic, okay? In an authentic sense. Because again, I think a lot of people who are pursuing the psychic arts, honestly, in this day and age, are really not in tune with the true psychicness, if you will. I think a lot of fear and anxiety still runs a lot of the show for a lot of people, okay? And maybe some of their mental programming is being misguided as intuition. And that is where the trickster energy is alive and well, my friends, and it is sprinkled all over the collective consciousness right now. So intuitive development is actually something I'm very passionate about teaching as well. That'll probably be a part of my work as time goes on. Really how to tap into intuition, how to discern what's true and not true. That is very important as well for reading tarot and for delineating astrology, quite frankly. So deep inner power struggles will also be very powerful here. Again, that power struggle within the Five of Swords energy in the early degrees of Aquarius, that first decan ruled by the Five of Swords. These inner conflicts will be powerful for that transformative unfoldment in the Aquarius part of your life. And again, these are going to be evolutionarily positive in the end. So, because we're dealing with trines and sextiles from Aries. So if we really examine our lives, this is all going to be baked and presented in a very more, for our own lives at least. Because even though these things will be transformative and very maybe difficult to handle, there's still a light at the end of the tunnel that we all know is going to be beneficial for our lives. It's just wow, we all have a lot of work to do here. And how am I going to make this work easier? How can I stop this inner conflict from consuming me? What do I need to do to be more present and more meditative throughout my life? And I'll tell you right now, my friends, meditation and dealing with very internal quiet states is how we're going to get through a lot of what's coming. And that is something I'm also very passionate about teaching and sharing. And in my videos, I talk a lot about that, how the inner stillness and getting very Buddhist, if you will, in some ways, about how we just observe reality versus attaching ourselves so firmly to it, as where we identify with every emotion and every thought and everything that goes on in this world. Because we do not have to do that. We do not have to identify with every thought, with every action of the world, but we need to be present and aware of it. And from there, can we really think through the right things? We can rewire our belief systems that way. We can liberate and awaken the true mind that way. We can get clearer on our intuition in that way. And Uranus and Gemini, with aspecting Pluto and all this stuff, I mean, we're being asked to become more psychically in tune, more intuitive in nature, so we can pierce through and become more mentally liberated. We have to, my friends. This will also be a really powerful time for psychic downloads. I think this will be a very powerful time for, again, discerning truth. And in our own life, I think our own lives, these Aries, Aquarius, and Gemini are going to be going through massive awakenings in this respect, where we get to the heart of what actually matters there. And we do what we actually feel called is right in our lives to do. And we need to liberate ourselves in many, many ways. And I'm very hopeful and very hopeful and actually very excited as the next 5 or so years unfold. And for you older folks out there who are looking ahead towards the end of your life, this is the time where you get very still and connected to the divine, okay? Because we need to always connect into that space, and you have to trust that the generations that are here and that are before you will bring this world into a place that has never thrived in a way that it's never thrived before. And I think that is truly the birthright of all human existence and all life, to evolve to a place where there is harmony and homeostasis. So getting still and quiet is very important for my older folks out there. And to liberate yourself from any mental prisons in the later stages of your life. And to do your best to get in touch with spiritual practices or methodologies that can help you understand the true nature of reality and of the source of all that is. And I'm not trying to get new agey and that woo-woo and spiritual out there, but that's the truth, guys. I mean, we are all just this expression of the divine, and all this stuff playing out in our life and on the world is all just theater. Okay, that's what the shamans, think, especially the Peruvian shamans I've, acquainted myself with over the years to study energy medicine with at a time in my life. This world is a theater, and we have to do our best to embody the roles, to liberate our minds, to liberate our hearts, and to participate in our mission statement here, which is what your soul contract birth chart is all about. That is your mission statement. That is your fate and destiny contract. And in this point in time, we are being asked and tasked with a lot of moments to evolve spiritually, psychologically, and also collectively as we are tied to this story unfolding. Now, I think I'm going to stop talking there, my friends, but this is a very powerful time. And as always, I always want to do my best when it comes to these outer planets to delicately talk about the world, because I'm not a political astrologer. I'm not someone who wants to get into the muck and to predict things. I know there's a lot of right-wing astrologers out there. I know there's a lot of left-wing astrologers out there. I've always been an independent because honestly, I think all government needs to be radically overhauled as well. But again, I'm definitely not a fascist. So let's make that clear. And anybody who is a fascist here, please see your way out. So every now and then I make these, I do drop a little bit of content on politics, I guess, because I want people to realize, like, hey, this is a place where we're trying to go beyond politics. We're trying to figure out what is the best path for humanity. Like, what is really the best path of humanity? And Uranus and Gemini is going to ask these questions. And it's going to be fueling Pluto in Aquarius and fueling Neptune in Aries and Saturn in Aries during the first year and a half, really, because then Saturn by next summer, 2026, will move on. It's going to be moving on more deeper into Aries, and we're going to have a whole different experience as Saturn starts aspecting other transits that are going to be happening in the sky. So this is the time that we're living in, my friends. And I think on a personal level, we have a lot of energy to work with and to really take on fully, to liberate ourselves. Like I said, I think liberate is probably the best word to use for the early degrees of Gemini. Again, that eight of swords energy. And what are we going to do to awaken something deeper in our life, in that Gemini part of our life, in that Aries part of your life, in that Aquarius part of your life, you know? Because Uranus is going to be that shamanic awakening force where there's also insight and innovation and things that provide us that psychic download that will change our life forever, that can inspire something so beautiful, you know, and change something that desperately has been looking to be changed. Okay. And on the world stage, that is what is going to happen, whether there are wars and conflicts or not. There is a lot that is going to be unfolding. And I want you to stay centered. I want you to stand in your power. I want you to find your own path of healing and spirituality. And I hope that my delineating and my explanations of astrology and tarot and other aspects of spiritual things will always help you navigate your true north. So that being said, this video is now over. A little bit different than some of my other videos, and occasionally you will see me get a little bit more like this, I guess, when it comes to, of course, more important, bigger transits. But other than that, I do hope you gained something from this. Please leave some comments down below and let me know what you think. And yeah, I will see you all in the next video.